Let's talk Ukraine, shall we? The former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt, is basically warning that Britain's commitment to Ukraine might be fading. The cheerleader seems to have lost her voice, he says in his piece. It's basically all about these tanks, and he's suggesting that we should be sending more tanks over to Ukraine. Matthew, where do you stand?
It seems to be, according to Lord Dannatt, and he was sort of head of the army or head of the armed forces, wasn't he? It seems that we don't actually have that much to give, which was one of the takeaway points that I took from the article. It's slightly concerning, because I do believe that we need to have a robust defence in this country, particularly with Russia out of control as it is under the despotic regime of Putin. What we could give them, he thinks, is a certain brand of armoured vehicle or tank that we don't any longer need and may end up on the scrap heap. And if it's true that we could give those quite easily, of course we should give them. I certainly think we should be attempting to do what European neighbours are doing. Of course, we don't have the same sort of budget as America, but if France and Germany are doing more than us at the moment, and that's what he's suggesting in terms of, well, if we believe what he's saying, then we should at least match what they're doing. Because one of the interesting things, you might agree with this, I don't know, Dominique, do you remember in February of last year when Russia invaded, people like me, the sort of Twitterati, were saying, we've got to help Ukraine, we've got to do this, and I stand by that. But there's a sort of conflict fatigue, isn't there, that means that our voices then get distracted by other things and we move on to the latest big story. We do need to keep our commitment to Ukraine because it is freedom fighting tyranny in Europe.
Look, I'm not a fan of the sort of common narrative around Ukraine that we just need to fund until there's nothing left. However, the idea that our support is fading for Ukraine or we're not doing enough for Ukraine, I just think it's absolute nonsense. We've been the front runner, the leader in terms of committing money to Ukraine, tens of thousands worth of equipment to Ukraine, lobbying other governments for Ukraine. We've done loads for Ukraine. And the idea that other European nations like Germany are now doing more when Germany didn't really want to get involved in the first place in terms of, like, committing to sending weapons, etc., because of Putin, I think is absolute nonsense.
But that does seem to be Lord Dannatt's point, that we were a front-runner and we no longer are.
Well, maybe it's because we're in a cost of living crisis right now and people can't afford to keep the lights on. So really, Rishi Sunak might be using his noggin and wants to tread lightly in terms of splurging and throwing more money at this country when we have barely any ourselves. I think it's very easy to sit there screaming from a corner, but you also have to think about the millions of people across this country that are quite uncomfortable with the rhetoric on Ukraine when they can't afford to eat or heat their homes.
Except, I think I haven't seen the latest opinion poll, but I think generally speaking, given the generosity of people taking refugees, Ukrainian refugees, into their houses, there was a huge groundswell in this country, still with Ukrainian flags, saying we have to do something. The fact is, if we don't stand up to these bullies, if we don't stand up to a dictator of the sort of evil that Putin is, and yes, he was nominally democratically elected, but he's essentially a dictator, then in the long run, we cause a bigger problem for us. I had to pay 900 quid for my energy bills over the course of 3 months
and
around
we're being
the autumn.
Told it's Putin, they were rising before the war.
That, to my mind, was a mind-boggling amount. It is a price I'm prepared to pay in order to stand up to that beast.
Would you put military boots on the ground?
No.
UK military boots?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't go that far. But I think that the way that we have been handling it has been, broadly speaking, perhaps up until this point, if Dannatt is right, and I don't know whether he is, broadly speaking, we've judged it relatively well, because we have trained their troops. We have given them light arms that have enabled them to shoot down Russian military hardware. We have, Johnson, I think, I'm going to be cynical about this, I think he did this partly to save his own skin, but I also think he believed in it. He made a lot of noise in support of Zelensky, and the West standing up, broadly speaking, to Putin in the first place, I think was really important. Did we want to go to war with Russia, literally war with Russia? I'm not quite sure we should have gone that far, and we haven't.